Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Russo from auction.com. I am the head of product, which means I work on all the software here at auction.com. I'm joined by my colleagues, Dan Wilsey and Kelly Burns. Dan is been with auction.com for over 15 years. He works as a senior vice president in our operations group. He's well versed in all things auction, as well as Kelly Burns, who runs our customer service center. So if you've ever called our customer service, you've most likely spoken to a member of her team. We are going to be the ones that talk to you today about your questions on buying on auction.com. As we get started today, I'm going to share a few things. Just a quick legal disclaimer. You can read it here from our legal team, but I would just like to emphasize for us, our goal of the webinar is to auction questions about buying at auction, specifically, of course, from auction.com. That primarily is about foreclosures or bank owned, whether it's in person or online. And how do you learn about that process, including, information discovery primarily or use discovery of what we do. So I'm going to just hop into the questions here. So our first question is something we get very often, which is how do you tell if the home is occupied or not? Um, Kelly, would you like to answer from what your team tells from a customer service perspective and how we drive people that information on the website?
From a customer service perspective, we usually will display on what is called our PDP or property details page if we have enough information. If the property is occupied, you typically want to treat it as if it is occupied, but it will be displayed on the property details page if it is available. However, the occupancy status can change at any time. And that information is shown and it will reflect also if you save our properties, if you're looking at any properties, if we have any information that comes up to date for us, you will get that. But you still should also conduct your due diligence in terms of looking into information about the property. But for foreclosure specific, you should consider them as occupied.
Yeah, can
Great.
I add on that a little bit? And that kind of brings us to like a good topic, which is like I saw this earlier in the question because I cheated and peeked a little bit. What's the difference between a foreclosure property and an REO property? I thought I saw that in one of these questions. And it's a good question because it kind of leads into this occupancy one. Is the foreclosure process in a simple way is there's a person who owns that property, and unfortunately they're not able to meet their obligation in regards to the debt of it, and the servicer, the bank that owns the mortgage on that property, is now going through a process in which they're trying to receive their money back, and it could be judicial, it could be through a trustee, it just depends on the state, and they're taking that to a public sale to try to retain the monies that were borrowed for that loan. So that's a foreclosure property. The owner of that property is the person who is living in that property or purchased that property to do as a rent, right? So there's an owner of that property that's not a banking institution. Once it goes through that foreclosure process, and if it doesn't sell to a third party on the courthouse steps or online, we could talk about that later, then it goes to the banking institution. And at that point, it becomes REO. And all that means is real estate owned. And that's the bank that now owns that property. So at that point, there is a new owner of that property and they can sell it in a different means. So in that process, you would imagine that if somebody's being foreclosed on, a lot of the time they're going to be occupying that property. They're going through a distress situation. And so it's safe to say that a majority of those properties are occupied. And then when it goes to the bank through that foreclosure process that didn't sell during the foreclosure sale, there's a high probability they're still occupying that house. Now the bank is the new owner of it, so they can start the process of the eviction process, but it's definitely possible that it's there. Now we work on the best assumptions that are provided to us through different data sources that we get that are including the seller, the banking institution, the attorney firms that are completing the sale. And so we make sure that we're constantly updating it whenever they provide us. But there's occupancy itself is an interesting one because I think a lot of us think, well, that just means there's somebody in there or not. There's actually levels of it as well. There could be somebody not in there, but there's valuable parts or pieces that they've left behind in there. And so those pieces that they left behind, call it material items, may have to be also withdrawn from that house, and that could be considered occupied. So there's a lot of different levels. Always good and I'm going to say this a lot throughout the course of this, is to have somebody who understands the local legalities from a county and city so that you understand these occupancy rules and so that you can act accordingly as you purchase these properties and go through the process.
Great. Thank you. This one we get a lot. Is there a title company you recommend to see if there's any liens without having to pay to find out? Um, the I don't know of one, to be honest. So all of us, Kelly, Dan, and I also happen to invest in real estate. Of the real estate that I've invested in the past, I've always conducted some level of effort of title search. There are lower levels of just liens and encumbrances that is not a full title search. Title companies tend to do this at a lower cost. You'd have to call one to find out. I would give a range that would be probably, depending on where you live, somewhere between $75 to $150, but it's well worth the due diligence to find out what you're going into. That's going to lead into some other questions that we have in regards to, there's multiple questions about how do we know um, if we get clean title, right? And so this is a really interesting topic when it comes to foreclosure, because foreclosure is meant to actually clean the title when especially when the first mortgagee, right? Sometimes there's junior liens, a second mortgage, a HELOC. There can be other liens that I'm going to get to in a second, but the process of taking the home through foreclosure is so on the other side there is clean title. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule. You should check specifically in where you're located and where you're looking to buy. Um, IRS liens, HOA liens tend to survive the foreclosure process. And so conducting that due diligence with the liens and encumbrances to know whether it'll come through with clean because it doesn't have these other encumbrances or there's other outstanding fines to pay is something you want to really know before you go into the foreclosure sale. If you could mark those, I think I can mark those. We covered that one. We covered that one.
There was a specific question on the HOA liens that I saw earlier as well. That's an interesting one for me as well, because I didn't know about this, but going out to the foreclosure auctions and completing foreclosure auctions and talking with the people that are out there, there's constant law changes. So if you're interested in like investing in real estate, you actually have to also be very in tune with what's changing within your local state jurisdiction. And about a couple of years ago, there was a change in the HOA lien position and how it becomes a senior lien in one of the states. And I was very impressed that these people were ahead of the game and were starting to buy up these deficient HOA liens as they're going through. So there's a lot of different things that you need to know, and it gets down to a state and locality level. So as you're investing, and what I've found from the people that are very successful that I've been able to talk to when I'm out at the sales is they may have an attribute or something that they do. They may be a real estate agent, or they may be a contractor, or a drywaller, or a title agent. But then they've surrounded themselves with the people to help them get through the process. So, like Mike was saying, we don't have a specific title company, but I do know that everybody that I've talked to that is successful is doing due diligence in regards to the lien position on the property. They're looking at the property, they're doing a drive by, they're doing a date down in the sense of if they pulled it 35 or 40 days ago, because it takes some time for these properties to move through the legal process when it comes to foreclosure, that they've did a date down, which means it pulls forward and makes sure there's no liens or encumbrances that have been put on there since when they did their last session. So it's really building that infrastructure around you to be successful, and then being able to find those properties on our website, and then use what we can provide you to kind of also accelerate your process in the due diligence to make sure you're purchasing something, because that's what we want you to do. We don't want you to purchase one. We want you to be able to be successful and purchase many properties.
Great. So with this, we answered, I believe. When it's a foreclosure, how do we know if we're bidding on oh, we actually
We
didn't.
didn't. Yeah, I'll just because I was kind of going off on that title part of it. This is a great one. So this is a huge part of your due diligence And I have talked with people who have purchased seconds through it, but there's also a strategy for junior liens when it comes to these as well, which is something, again, you can go out and investigate and find. But this is a very specific activity that you'll have to do to validate that when you're going into the purchase at a foreclosure sale, that you are purchasing which lien is on the property. And you can do that through the review of where the property is on our website and whatever information we have on there, including the APN and the address, and then validate what that lien position is. And I would do that with a professional, a lawyer, depending on the state, or a title agent to make sure that lien is in first position. My background was lending. Now my background is in auction. But there's always times when the deeds get recorded in misorder. So having someone, again, that's very knowledgeable in that process is key in here, because I have seen where what is maybe considered a junior lien has been recorded in first position, and somehow that first lien, which is a larger loan amount, has subordinated somehow on there. So definitely something that you want to do your due diligence on to make sure you're purchasing those liens. And then also too, it's an interesting way to find out what is the strategy, if there is one, with the junior liens that are on there.
Great. I also see on another screen, Dan, there's more questions coming in. So if anyone, I see we've had about 14 people answer the poll. There's about 7 people on the Q&A on Slido. If you could just do us a favor and use that in order to ask your questions, that would be of great help. I'll just go back to the top. So one of the things that hasn't been asked here, but I'll talk a little bit about, is it's asking what is the difference between online bidding and remote bidding. And this and the next question get into what is bank owned or REO homes that are on the site, and what are the foreclosure homes. And so in some places, foreclosure homes that we sell, like in Georgia and Texas and California, people either show up at the location to bid either at the county courthouse, or we hold auctions in ballrooms in California, and they actually come and they present the checks that they're supposed to bring in order to register for the auction, and they show up in person. They bid at a live auction where there's an auctioneer calling out the bids. The remote bidding, we do have a remote bidding for that, for people that can and will fund their account on auction.com in order to not come to the county courthouse, but can bid remotely from their phone or a tablet or computer. The difference in that, and it's all depending on the difference in all the different counties and state laws, but with remote bidding, you will typically fund your account up to what you're willing to spend that day at the auction. So if you're looking to spend up to $300,000, whether it's on one home or multiple homes, you're not sure what you want to buy, or you're very specific what you want to buy, you would have to register with us. You'll get wiring instructions, and you would wire that money to an earnest money account, a special account that holds those funds for your bidding up to that amount on our platform. Online bidding is what you see specifically for our bank-owned homes. Those homes, and one of the things I noticed from the poll is there's quite a few people that answer that they're both learning, or they're looking for a home to live in, right? And so I've personally bought homes privately. I've bought homes that are REO homes before I came to auction.com. Everything in my investing was prior to coming to auction.com. And then also I bought a home at Foreclosure where I live in Massachusetts. And so what I would say about that is my comfort level. There's some people that just have high comfort and they're willing to jump right into foreclosure, right? And they do their due diligence, they show up at the auction, or they sign up for the remote bid account, and they just have a much higher comfort level. I was not personally that person, right? My comfort level grew with time, right? And so buying a bank-owned home, right, those that you find on our REO on our website, those are all bid online. Some of them have due diligence. Some of them are vacant, right? Some of them, if you're working with a real estate agent, you can actually get into the home. Not a lot of them, but some of them, right? Because when you're going into this, you are trying to figure out um, what will I need to do this home? And that is a big portion. I think there's some questions in here that is very different about buying at auction compared to buying traditionally, right? So if any of you have bought a home prior, which there's some of you that have bought flips in the past, there's some that are learning, but maybe you've bought a home, that you live in, right? That traditional process that you make an offer, you come to an accepted price, and then you conduct your due diligence and usually an inspection. That is not how auctions work. It's not how it's not just auction.com. That's just not how auctions work, right? So in auctions, you as the buyer are expected to do your due diligence prior to bidding, right? Whatever due diligence that you feel comfortable with. If there's an information that you're not able to get in order to feel comfortable, then you shouldn't bid on that property, right? It really comes down to your comfort level with the information you have and adjusting that for the price that you're willing to pay, right? And there's questions in here as far as like what's the discounted auction versus traditional and things like that. That's a pretty hard question to answer, right? But, and I think this is something that is I didn't think of till now. It's not something that was specifically asked. There is a question in here, Dan, somewhere where someone asks like, how come there's so many homes that like are
Yeah.
getting, but that don't sell? So
Yep.
I'm gonna cover that briefly for a second.
Okay.
So the properties at foreclosure or bank owned have an amount at foreclosure. It's typically called a credit bid, right? Some of our properties you can see the credit bid before the foreclosure. Some you can't. That depends on the seller, right? And then all of our properties that are online for REO are bid with what's called an undisclosed reserve, right? So when you bid, you're only going to know the reserve once it's been met, right? We're not in the time frame of the 2012 to 16 time frame where I get in lots of conversations, and I'm sure Kelly's team does too, where people are coming to bid and their retort to us is like, the bank needs to sell these homes, right? Like they should be taking my bid. That isn't how the process works, folks, right? There's a very methodical process that involves insurance, the bank, their mark to market process, how long they've held it in inventory, any appraisals or broker price opinions that they're getting that set the numbers that they're expected to receive for these homes, right? And in turn, those numbers are given to us, right? So what I tell people in their bidding strategy is that if you see a property that's on auction.com and it's something you've done your due diligence, you're comfortable with the amount, and you sign up to bid and you bid for that property, if where that bidding is and it didn't meet the reserve is far off what you're willing to pay, you should save the property. You should keep an eye on it, right? And either somebody's going to be willing to pay what the bank wants relatively soon, or the bank will tend, just like a regular homeowner. If the market's not meeting my price, eventually they'll probably adjust their price, right? And that's just part of how the game works, whether you're with a private seller or a bank seller. That is how it works. But for the new people out there, and I think there was a question there about first look, right? Because there are some people that completed the poll saying that they're looking for a home to live in. So if you're looking for a home to live in, right, first look is for people that homes are being sold. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan or Kelly, there is some government sponsorship there that like
Correct.
they're, yep. So the government actually is giving you the first opportunity in order to buy those homes in order to live in, right? Now, so those are a good place to look if there's one available.
For like specifically the people on this, or a majority of them that are going to be occupants of those properties. So the first look process is designed for the opportunity for first time individuals to purchase those properties and get the ability to live in there. So it's specifically designed for some of the people that are on this call, and you can find it as one of the search items. If you go onto the auction.com website, you can actually start to look at these properties specifically. Now, one of my personal things is, hey, there's not financing, and a lot of people on a first time property needs to do financing. So what you'll have to like kind of figure out what that due diligence process looks like as well. But this is a great process for a lot of people that are trying to either get into investment or looking for something to buy for themselves on these first look processes that are like government backed processes. And then there's actually a state one as well. So there's just, again, back to like what I said before, is there's layers of interesting laws and then government sponsored entities that are producing these different products that we're trying to bring to you on the website and display for you so that you can find them and make the best decision for you as part of your due diligence process.
Great.
I want to
Kelly,
talk more about remote bidding though, because there's a couple
okay.
of questions that are in here. So there's the funding one that's right here. This is obvious. I spent a lot of time working on remote bidding, so it's close to me a little bit as well. So funding your remote bidding account. And there's a question in here which I wanted you to say, and it's the right one to ask. So a lot of people are new and they want to experience the auction, but you can't go to an auction like a foreclosure live auction because it's 9 to 5 and it's on a Tuesday and I work a full-time job. That's okay. You can experience it in a different way, which is within our app or on our website, and you can watch the counties that you're interested in, so you can get really an experience. You can do it, just log in, create an account, accounts are free, and you can go onto your mobile device and you can find the county and watch it there, or you can go in, log onto the website. You can log into both if you wanted to, and then go to your buyer profile, or excuse me, your buyer, and then into remote bidding, and then watch the auctions that day, and then sort it through based on the county. So you can get the experience of what it's like, the bidding activity that's going on. And what I do is I actually go in and I look at the properties a little bit before, and I make some determinations on in my specific areas and the areas that I would be investing in. I would look and say, like, where would I be on this property, and start to understand how those properties are moving or what they're selling at. And am I in the market or not? And sometimes if I find I'm not in the market, then I start to look at another market. I live in Southern California, so I'm looking at Orange County. There's not a lot of properties there. So I can extend into Riverside County and then Los Angeles and San Diego counties that are adjacent to me and kind of touch Orange County in that way, and see, like, can I go into this market and am I going to be able to get a little bit more for my money in a different county, or do I expand, or am I looking right for there? So watching those auctions through the remote bidding and understanding the area as you go in is part of your due diligence. To get approved is even easier. You just go in, you go through the process, you make sure you fill out everything in your account. You have to create a purchase profile. And then there's a review of a Jumio to make sure we know who you are. And then now you're approved. Funding the account is easy. Once you've done that, there's wiring instructions in there for an escrow company. The escrow company will hold those funds. And if you win on property, those funds will be taken out of your account and you're done to go. Just like Mike was talking about the full funds. Or again, back to your due diligence, some states do not require full funds at a foreclosure sale. They only require a deposit, again, which is on the website, starting with your due diligence. So a lot of different things that are going on there. And then there's this $1,000 deposit, which I feel, Mike, that's like really close to you in regards to something you've been working on here with everybody as well.
Yeah, so Susan T asks a couple different questions, which is how can I best watch a remote auction process? So that is for foreclosure, Susan, right? So there's both foreclosure and online. So I'll just touch upon that for a second. I don't know where you're located. The best way to learn about foreclosure auctions, my personal opinion, is to go to one, right? And actually witness them going on. If I wanted to learn about foreclosure, I wouldn't start remote. I'd actually show up at the auction because you're going to learn the most. We actually have staff at those auctions that we're conducting in California, Texas, Georgia, many other states, where you can learn the most and interact with the team. From an online auction perspective for the bank-owned homes, we require $1,000 deposit before you can bid. And so why do we do that? So number one, the $1,000 deposit is fully refundable if you don't win, right? What it does is what I tell people is, you know what? Coming to bid on a home on auction.com is not a video game, right? So we don't want people here that are just coming in and bidding and they just signed up and they have no skin in the game. I used to actually own an auction company outside auction.com prior from 2010 to 2017. And it doesn't matter whether it was my auction company or, there's tends to be lots of auction companies in places like North Carolina and Kansas, Tennessee. And it's very common for an auctioneer to charge a bidder deposit, right? So it's a good faith of like putting up that I'm serious to be here. And if you don't perform on your obligation, which is I won the property, right? I'm now expected to go through and take the steps to close on that property, then that money would be forfeited during that process, right? We're not doing it to penalize people. We're doing it to make sure that if you're here to bid on a property on auction.com, that you have serious interest in trying to buy it. The um so Susan, in those cases, and I'd love to hear, most of you should have my email to ask me other things too. I'll get in touch with you, Susan, because we want to explore some other things in relation to allowing people to watch the online auctions. Today, you do have to register in order to see the bidding. Without registering, you can see what the current bid is, right? So you can go on an auction, follow it, see what the current bid is, see if it meets reserve, but you cannot see the bid history. But the bid history only has the last 3 bids. The question about, I'm going to go to this next one here. How come there's so many properties where people bid, but the reserve isn't met? So this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, right? Earlier, I was saying that there is a reserve that the seller has set, right? Our job as the auctioneer is to get to that. There are a large number of properties that don't actually meet reserve, but still sell. But it's got to be within the ballpark, right? So what would happen in that case is our auction team would take a bid that might be close and talk to the seller and see if they're willing to accept it. But for example, if you're bidding on a property that had a reserve of 100,000 and you're bidding at 50,000, that's not likely to happen, right? I would think about it the way you would in a very traditional sense. Even though these are banks or the government, what have you, they're really no different. They're still people, right? And they're no different than traditional sellers. When they have a price, they're expecting to get close to that price, right? And if they're not getting close to that price, they're going to be moving down. I wouldn't be so focused on um, the properties that aren't meeting demand, meeting the reserve, unless for you it's a property that you're willing to buy. That part is just a matter of on that specific period of a 2-week period that the property's up for sale. There was nobody at that specific time. So I wouldn't tend to focus on that. I have a couple people raising their hands, Dan. Like I'm thinking I'll just let them unmute and ask their questions.
Or they could put it in the chat too as well, right?
I tried to ask them to do that, but that didn't work.
I was going to jump on this financing allowed or is it cash only? So it's an interesting scenario, right? And we're talking about we have a wide vast of products that we're selling on auction.com. We kind of touched on a few of them. We're talking about foreclosure, and then we're talking about like bank owned properties or REO, and then some of them have different flavors within them, right? But the idea of financing, like again, I told you all that my background was in financing. There is properties that are financeable on here. And we didn't kind of dip into this a little bit. We also have people that are individuals that are putting their properties on our website and selling them. So right now there's 141 properties on the website that allow financings. And I know a lot of the individuals here are first time people based upon the poll. So you can go in and search the website in your location, and then you use your filters, and the filters it says eligible for financing. So if you have to use financing for your first transaction, or you're using financing for this transaction, you can go and do the search and then see if there's anything that's eligible in there. And then again, you'll want to do your due diligence with your lender to make sure that it's going to meet based upon what you're pre-approved for, because different lenders and different products within the lending do require certain things when it comes to the financing itself. So Yes, a majority of the properties I will say are cash only, and we talked about some of those reasons why. Is unfortunately you can't see in a lot of the foreclosure properties, and you probably won't because of how the ownership goes. And then there's the REO properties that are just the other side of that. But I also looked at a property yesterday, and I have it's been on the platform and it's gone through, and they've been doing the owner. This is a banking institution, and they've been working on trashing it out and cleaning it out, and month over month. It takes time, right? Just like anything we do, it's getting better and better. So it's a matter of watching those properties as well and seeing how they turn and kind of change, which may allow them to become financeable at some point as well. So it's a good question, and I think over time you'll start to see, especially now as the financing market is starting to change, which is nothing we do, and we'll go back to the disclosure, but there's definitely opportunities out there that are growing, and the financing realm itself is changing very much as well.
But the point is that they're primarily cash only, unless you're working with a finance company that's willing to finance. A lot of them require interior access. A lot of our properties don't have interior access. Some companies do what's called desktop appraisal. And so I would say, you know, try and find somebody that's doing a desktop appraisal. We're working on a list to provide that to other people. Building your network of team around where you're buying as you're new in this is one of the best investments you can make in relation to how you look at whether it's buying real estate at auction or buying real estate in general. When you're getting into investing, having that team of people that you can trust and depend on is where I would start. So a lot of places also have investment groups, right? And so if you haven't looked at that in the past, I would look at an investment group. If you are looking to buy a home to live in, I would still look at go if you're looking at foreclosure, go to foreclosure. If you're looking at buying online at auction, I would still talk to a real estate agent and see if they can help guide you through the process. The like whatever it takes in order for you to feel comfortable to really know what you're bidding on. This next question, I actually am going to change screens. I have a slide for. The question was, what's the discount? Number one. So I said earlier, that's a really hard question for us to answer. Um, but I did have some data that I pulled from a presentation from our economist, which is how much are people spending? Right? Now, what you're spending is greatly dependent on where you are, right? I live in Massachusetts. I was just visiting somebody in South Carolina where they bought a brand new home built by a brand new home builder for a price that on a per square foot price that we couldn't even buy materials for here in Massachusetts, right? I'm sure the same as in California. The property was selling for, selling, right, by the home builder for under $200 a foot. Here in Massachusetts, like even a standard home, we're not building for under $400 a foot, right? So
Local
every
500 to 550 a square foot right now.
right. So it all really depends. These numbers really depend on where you are, right? But as you can see, this is provided by John Burns Research. It was done, the data was in the fourth quarter of last year. Most flippers, 61%, spent between 31,000 and 90,000 on renovations before they put the home back on the market. You can see some spend far more, some less, less than 10K. That would be amazing. I don't know if I could get an interior of a house painted for 10K where I live today, but there's also a lot of people that do this themselves, right? They have skills, they want to put their skills to work, they're not afraid of sweat equity, and this is a great place to start. So I just wanted to share that information based on that question. Let me go back here to
Yeah, so Rose is actively on the title, and I didn't see this one before. Sorry, Rose. She's asking a question that it says if you typically pay 75 to 150 for a title to do a title lien search, which is might be that's pretty good. 40 days before the auction and don't miss the auction, it actually doesn't, the property doesn't actually go to auction. So this is like, we are tracking this constantly. Like we live by this in the foreclosure world. And we have we're great about making up terminology. So we have an idea around brought to auction. So we know But we get a bunch of properties that come in, right? And remember, like, we'll go back to the foreclosure process. So you have an individual that has been unfortunately not able to make those payments in a banking institution that's trying to collect those funds from them. Sometimes they recover. That's great. We want that, right? They've gone through loss mitigation. They've gotten another loan. They made themselves current. That's a natural part of the process. And so we're seeing if we have 100%, between 25 and 30% of those properties actually go to sale. And it's not on the first run. So what I mean by that is California is a postponement state. So that property can come in and they could be working the process with the banking institution and trying to come up with other means to make the payments. And they could postpone it several times throughout the process. Or it could get canceled, it could show back up. But right now we're seeing about between 25 and 30%, depending on the month, fluctuates a little bit, of those properties that start, and they start around, I'm going to tell you 25 days that they would be new on the website, are the ones that actually go to sale. So there's a lot of indicators that Mike and his team have put on the auction that are trying to give you an idea of which ones that we're calculating. And we do a lot of work around analytics to give you the highest probability for those properties to go to sale, as well as which ones we have identified based upon the performance by that seller in those areas and how they're pricing those areas that should be very good deals for you. And we call them hot deals that are going to sale, as well as now. And we touched on it, but I think it's so important because if you've been to the website like in the last 2 or 3 years and now you're seeing it now, the credit bid is on there. So that is what the bank is looking for when they get to that property. And I know a lot of you are new on here. So if you bid $1 over that, you now have acquired that property. So having that credit bid identified is important from that standpoint because you know there's a floor in my mind that you could purchase that for. And also too, like if you see the credit bid and what the banking institution is well over what you want, that also is an indicator to you that that's not your property and that you can spend the time to look at other ones and see if there's another property and start doing some due diligence on the other ones. We are really working hard on trying to get that even earlier for you so that you can have that information. And if there's a property that you're interested in, we've also started to set those up where you can be notified when those come in so you can start to do even more of that due diligence process and have a better identifier on how to purchase that property as you move forward.
The one thing I want to add, what Dan said is if you bid $1 over the credit bid, that's if you're the high bidder, right? That's assuming you're the high bidder at that point. I think there's another question in the waiting room.
There is, but it's for me.
Oh, got it. Okay. I still see some hands raised. I've asked for people to use the chat. I really would rather not unmute people. So I'm asking you that if you use Slido or to use the chat to ask your question, I'd really appreciate it. A couple things that there was a question that I didn't see that got deleted, which was I'm saving properties and they're getting removed from the website. What happened to them? And so especially with foreclosure properties, the seller, the owner, even though they're in the foreclosure process, has the right to pay off their home. They even if they can sell it for more than they owe, they could sell the home before foreclosure. Um, Auctions tend to get canceled and postponed quite often. And so we're working on remedying that soon so that properties don't actually disappear from the website, but you'll actually be able to see what happened to it. So whether it got canceled or postponed, so that you can keep a tab on that, but not just have it leave the website. So I really appreciate you asking that question because it's very near and dear to my heart for delivering an experience to you. So we have a few minutes left, but if I see another question, I don't know if that question's relevant, Dan, coming in.
It is. It says the chat is disabled on the webinar. Question. Hold on. Let me just move it over. Sorry. My question is, do you have any suggestions when buying an occupied home and finding out the current status, such as eviction notice sent, or has the court happened and has occupant been removed, the lock changed? I mean, those are great question, Holly. Those are all things that, depending on where it's at in, like, let's call it a distressed property life cycle are going to be available to you. Some of them are public. Some of them we'll get from the seller in the REO world that we'll be able to provide you, and we'll be updating the website. That's kind of like the statement I said earlier is as things are progressing with the bank-owned properties, we're very tied into the bank themselves, and they're giving us updates about, hey, we've trashed out this property, or the eviction's been completed. We have a scheduled trash out of this date. Now, not all of it goes right to the website. Some of it we're waiting for, and we'll show you the new photos on the property. And that's something that we'll tag so that when you're going back to the property, you see that there's new photos that kind of pop up to the top of it. So there's a lot of different ways you can go through there. There's a new one here on here. There's actually quite a few.
Great.
So if you want to put them back up. Yep. Bought my
So
first home on auction.com, but lots of duplicating in expenses. I'd love to jump into that more. I will pull up with you later because I'd like just to understand that, because that may be something that we want to share with others, but we can't like get everybody on the same time. What is the trash out date? So trash out, when I say that, it's a more of a term when it comes to bank-owned properties. So when somebody's left that property, or when they've completed the eviction process, or they've left willingly, there may be trash. And if you go to some of the properties that are on our website, I'm sure you see this behind, that has to be, we want to remove that so that you can take occupancy of that property and not have to do it yourself. So that's a normal step within within the like distressed property cycle.
the good news is if the property is getting trashed out, it means it's vacant. I have my bidder ID without funding my account. Can I watch the remote bidding process for foreclosure on a saved property?
Yep,
Yes, you can.
love it. Industry taglines and cost of an occupant out. Woo, that's a good one. We've worked with a couple different eviction providers. There's actually eviction providers on our website as well. There's not a simple answer here. It's based upon a lot of different caveats. I mean, all the way down to the city. I know I've referenced that a couple of times, but the legal, just depending, like for me, if it's an LA city property, that is a lot more, that's difficult to do because of if it's a tenant or if it's an occupant or how they're into that property. So you've got to find, and that's a part of that crew, right? That group that you have around you that's making sure that you've got the right things that are there. So you've got to find that eviction person. And a lot of the times, like I reference back to the attorney firm that's on the website, the attorney firm in a lot of these cases will provide or have a service that they'll provide the eviction services for the sellers of these properties as well. So not only could you ask them about title services, but you could also ask them about eviction services. But that would be also something you'd want to do with that group around you, right? So that's a very good question. And it's very, very nuanced. So a very good due diligence question as well.
And one thing on the nuance, um, like I live in Massachusetts. It's very hard to evict somebody, right? New York, Pennsylvania, California, these are hard states to evict people. Georgia, not as hard, right? So, Florida, not as hard, right? So it really is geographic specific down to the county level. And that's part of building that team around you, finding a lawyer that you can trust, that has done this process before. So, I really, that is somewhere that you want to put some effort into. The other alternative, is, for example, the foreclosure that I bought did have a tenant in it. I was actually happy to keep her as a tenant. She was paying good rent. But I actually wound up giving her cash for keys, and she wound up finding another place to live. So these are things that, are a little bit advanced player mode, right? But it's something like you should talk to other people about. Well, I see yep. Why doesn't auction.com check lien info and then add these charges on the price of the home? That was the way the buyer are sure to pay. I don't know who asked that. I love that you asked that. Um, and it's an ongoing discussion that because you asked it, I'm going to raise it again. But it is something that for Dan and I and Kelly is also near and dear to our heart of like how we can provide this information. As us as a big company, to do it at complete mass scale would be that is the challenge. But thank you for asking. It's something that we're diligently working on. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left. There are still 53 people on, but if you have some questions, I see another question came in. We'll hang out for another minute, but as soon as the questions run out, we'll end the webinar. Dan, one more question. I see it.
Hold on, I'm trying to get back there. Yeah, hold on.
Because there are a lot of properties.
And I just say to everyone on the call is just congratulations. This actually is your first step to due diligence. I live in Texas. I have invested in real estate. It's a challenge. And so the fact that you even sat on here and asked the question, I want to give you kudos for doing that. And everyone on here, I mean, and what the gentleman have said has just been about make sure you have a team around you that you can trust. You're going to need a contractor. You're going to need a real estate agent. You're going to need an attorney. Someone like make sure your toolbox is of subject matter experts in everything. I know some of the things that I've learned is I cannot do it on my own. So go to auctions. Make sure you just kind of understand first how an auction works. Understand the participation terms of an auction. Know that when you are participating in these types of auctions, whether it's with auction.com or anywhere else, that it is as is. So the understanding is that you know what you're doing. So if you're placing bids, whether it's online or remotely or in person, then you knew that you've done all the homework and you understood the assignment, so to speak, when you decided to place that bid. Your highest and best is you. What do you want to spend on this property? After doing all of your homework, like I know how much I want to put into it. My intent is either to flip it. This is how much I'd have to spend to get it up to speed of whatever the market is that I live in. If you intend to hold it because you wanted to make it a rental property, what does that look like for you? How much are you trying to get in rent to get your money back? And then it's a numbers game. You cannot have a lot of emotions involved in it. So as one person asked about how to come properties go away, Dan mentioned brought to auction rates, it's around 25%. So if you see 100 properties or you see 10 properties, expect properties that are pending into foreclosure. Expect probably 3 to actually go to sale. And then there's ways on our website to dwindle down and look at properties that have a high potential of going to sell. But then you can still also call us and ask us questions, and our team will be here to help you as well.
Oh, wow. We get a bunch more
Yeah,
questions.
there's like all of a sudden it's just and they're obviously fantastic questions. And I was gonna Kelly's kind of stole my idea, but what's is like just sitting on here, this is an opportunity for you, a lot of new people, and we're happy to do it. And thank you for joining us. And for me, like just to add to that, it's like I come from a family who's invested in real estate now in the third generation, and that was our first generation that came to the United States. So this is creating wealth. So you're taking an opportunity not only to create wealth for yourself, but also generational wealth. So I'm more than happy to share the information, and I'm getting interesting things back from you guys as well by doing this. So continue to send us the questions, and we'll continue to answer them. I like the can I buy title insurance part of the auction. I would have done that one first, Mike, but I'll let you take the
Here,
limits. No,
there you
no.
go.
I mean, you don't want to buy title insurance prior to the auction.
No,
Like
and
that's
I
that.
don't think you can.
I don't think you can either because you don't own the house. But I mean, you got to do that due diligence, right? That one's such a key one. And
I
like,
mean,
I'm
that would
gonna.
be cool. That would be cool. Like if somebody could like even buy life insurance for me, I guess, like a part of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I didn't say something, and I got to tell you, I've looked at close to over the lifetime probably 10,000 title reports, and I'm not joking. From a lending perspective, as an underwriter, And as a mortgage broker, I've had to review these title policies. And honestly, I have a very basic concept of, am I refinancing or am I completing the right lien? The rest of the jargon that's on there, you need someone who's professional to look at it for you and make sure that you're understanding what you're getting yourself into. So that's such a key element for me. And as I build a team, one of my people is, in fact, a title company and then title underwriter.
Um, are there limits to regular real estate investors who are at every auction bidding on everything? Um, so do we have limits on them? No, right? Do they have limits? Yes, they all do. Um, Most people don't have infinite cash, right? And so the average real estate investor that comes to our auction, the even the ones that are buying many homes from us a year, there's only so many they can buy, right? And so would they be bidding on lots of them? If you go and you watch the auction of the ones where people tend to be bidding, you might have three, four, five people bidding. Sometimes there's just one, but of the ones that three, four, or five are bidding, they still only one buyer, right? And so they tend to, you know, there is a limit, right? Like I said, most of them don't have infinite cash. So, um, but it is a many people, this is what they do for a living, right? And so that is the arena that you're going into, especially with foreclosure.
Can I read into this question a little bit?
Yeah.
It says, are there limits to regular real estate investors who are at every auction bidding on everything? I feel like you're asking, like, hey, am I going to get beat out by the same three people or same person at the auction? They're actually more concerned with the individual buyer. I get to work with a couple of the bigger ones that are here because they're very engaged in what they're going to make, and they have to be like their profit margin has to be there. So for you as an individual buyer that may be putting, like Mike said, sweat equity or something in there, you have opportunities that they don't. And they have capital restraints and they have some restraints in regards to what they can purchase and what they have in their pipeline. And again, where I'm talking to the majority of you, which is based upon the survey, so you actually have a leg up. So if I'm reading into that a little bit, it feels to me like you're asking, am I going to beat out? It's really what's your tolerance compared to that, just like any other auction would be. And so I would say get out there and see who's there, and then see where you're priced at in the market and how you're going to be able to profit from the real estate purchase. Are there any worse for hard money lenders? Whew.
Yeah. We have one that I'll circulate in the follow-up for a page with some hard money lenders. It is something that we are working more so on. So I appreciate that question. I think there's two in the waiting room too. Um, as we wind down on time, because there are a lot of properties the day before auction, spending it is not worth it. I understand that feeling. That's a hard thing for us to, we're not in control of that, right? And so that really, for me, it just depends on, how you do it. Um, for me, if I'm going to bid on a property, I spend the money. Am I bidding on 10 properties at once? Tend not to be. But it is just something that I count as my cost of doing business.
Yeah, that I think I was going to say that too. Like the unpopular answer to that is the cost of doing the foreclosure property buying. REO is different. There's more finality there, right? So you may get a little bit more of a discount because in a foreclosure property you can't see inside of it, right? But maybe you can see inside of an REO, so you may get a little bit less of a discount. But there's also the more certainty within the process to some extent, right? So these are all varied weights that are on there. I love this question. It's obviously somewhat internal, just kidding. But the question around the MCP, are you planning to offer interact with our system APIs and MCPs? This is great. I would,
We're in active internal conversation.
yeah.
Obviously, an AI is a big part of all of our futures and continues to grow. It's something that we're immensely committed to. And so stay tuned for more on this. But thank
But
you.
we've tipped into this already, right? Like it's on the website. Use the AI assistant and provide us that feedback, right? Just like any other, this person is obviously an AI tool user. So you know that we're training these tools in real time. So this tool is only going to get better with you guys. And I use it and it does a great job. So that for the people who are newer within the site, we are getting these tools and we're putting them on there as fast as we possibly can.
Thank you for the question. This one's a little more interesting. If you talk to neighbors and found out the home is not occupied, but you see evidence there's a lot of personal property in the front of the home and inside the home, can these items be thrown out after auction, or is there laws regarding storing personal items? That one you're going to have to address on the locality level, right? So if you bought the home, you're going to have to, verify that the property is vacant, right? And make sure that you've gone through that process. And then if there's personal property that's left, that's all going to be on a local level, whether you can throw it out. I wish I could offer you better general information, but that is a highly localized question. With that, that seems to be our last question. We happen to be right at time. Thank you very much we had well over 60 people at points that were part of our webinar today. We'll send a follow-up with, answers to the questions and a summary. And we really thank you for your participation and look forward to you being a part of the auction.com environment and working on buying homes with us. Have a great day.